Yeah, I can see it now. Are you gonna put it on full screen? Perfect. See it now.
All right, perfect. So yeah, so let's get started. So this is yeah, the report is called Insurance Landscape Evolution and Emergence of MGA MGU Model with a focus on health insurance and Asia markets. So that's really kind of a very specific topic, but actually that specific topic raised kind of various questions across the insurance landscape in Asia, and so that's the thing. Just switching to the agenda of the reports, which you can see probably now. So what we tried to do on this report was to address like a few questions on the insurance landscape evolution, strategies of incumbents and new players in this landscape. What is the MGA landscape, at least in Asia, so by country? So there is like some deep dives, and obviously what are the implications on this topic, and that's how it's been made. Maybe to give a start on that, when starting to look for data and information for making the report, probably the first try to reach out to like number of clients and number of contacts of various stakeholders across the insurance landscape, from reinsurers, insurers, brokers, MGAs, tech companies. So that's some care providers, colleagues, and the first thing that struck was like nobody agrees on the definition of MGA. So that was kind of the start of this thing. So I want to be friend with everyone. So I'm not gonna pretend to have the definition. And so at least I just took the definition which is commonly known. So on this thing. So, but please bear in mind this is not intended to give a definition of what it is or what it is not. And so at least more to see the evolution of the players which tend to act or behave such as MGAs in this landscape. And that's why I'm going to move on the first section, which is some macro trends in the area. And so that's why you got this first slides. I guess it's probably appearing on your screen right now, which is a nice and colorful matrix showing kind of the insurance landscape. Because instead of trying to get the answer of what is an MGA or what it is not, try to put, I mean, what are the players from that landscape and what are they doing? Okay. It's still quite high level, but still quite intending to present some evolutions. So on this value chain, you got reinsurers, insurers, agents, brokers, MGA, MGUs, insurtech, TPAs, care providers. I guess we got most of everyone, whoever they call the chain. And then in terms of activities or what they do, product development, sales and distribution, underwriting, policy admin, claims management, and treatment or access to treatment. Okay. And here you can see these color codes. So the darker one is kind of the core activity of the players in that landscape. The light, the middle blue one would be like this kind of secondary activities, which is like they frequently do, and it could be delivered also in partnerships. So that's kind of thing. And the light blue one is more like kind of an entry in a new segment by the player. Okay, so there is no timing in this one because some may have entered like earlier. There is no intention to say that this is recent or something, but it is more to show the evolution of what is core activities versus like new activities. And obviously, this landscape is kind of evolving on these things, and I will come back on this later on. But that's the thing. So if I start from the, I mean, we speak about insurance landscape. So if I start from the insurers, they tend to do everything, or they tend to be able to do everything. Okay? But at some point, for legacy reasons or like strategic reasons, tend to delegate things because it makes full sense for this topic. And so that's why we see, if we start from this insurer topic, insurer column, then we can see that they frequently delegate sales and distribution, of course, policy admin and billing, claims management, and they tend to keep, I mean, the core of the core would be product development and underwriting. That's the thing. So they are the only one in this value chain to get the license. which is a clear asset, which is like maintained with the compliance, and which is a thing that creates this whole ecosystem around them. So that's very very important to remind. The other players do not have this license, do not pretend to be insurers, are not, and so that's why they may have delegation, for example, of underwriting in the case of agent brokers or MGAs, but that's the thing. Now people tend to, you can see horizontally, to be involved in product development. Okay, so of course, starting from reinsurers, having some data, being proactive in these things. On the tech side, we've seen like a number of tech companies which are like disrupting or proposing or being a force, a value proposition on these things to create some new products, especially on affinity side, but not only. And then MGUs also coming on this, because it's one of the things where they can have a focus on some particular areas. So that's the thing. Maybe we can speak for like ages about this landscape, and so I prefer to move on. But that's just to give a perspective that things are evolving, and every player or stakeholders in this value chain is trying to step in other areas for development of their value chain or business model, which is fully understandable. And I'll come back on this in a minute. If I switch briefly about the next few slides, we have looked at what are the what insurers are looking when partnering with MGAs, and to make it simple, yes, of course, I think efficiency, customer services, which is kind of a must-have. So that's the two things you can see on the left. But the thing I found more interesting were the number 3 and number 4, which are still like quite the same level of thing, which is access to new markets and technical capabilities. Okay? And those things tend to make a difference from the MGAs, which tend to be very tech-driven, besides their normal capabilities of underwriting or proposition or handling, administration, policy admin. But that two things would be kind of key in the message for my standpoint, to the access to new markets and technical capabilities. Just moving briefly. On the other hand, MGAs are looking, because at least at some point they have the right to look for something when partnering with insurers, typically is market reputation. So that's really the thing to assure their customers about efficiency of the reimbursement and the way their case is going to be handled. Because by fronting their relationship to customers, they also engage their own reputation, and that's why they want to secure to have like a solid insurer in the background, which is gonna have this track record or efficiency in the scene. Moving a bit quickly, the next one was just we looked at the the equity side of the MGAs on both things. So also in the report there is like a kind of trend where like the brokers tend to consolidate or to decrease in numbers across like the landscape. On the other end, the share of MGA is something that tend to increase. And also these kind of trends attract, obviously, private equity, which is usually from what we see are the first people which are like sniffing and understanding where are the potential for future value. And so we can see clearly that MGA has, I would say, a strength or like a flip in terms of ownership, where private equity is much more investing or much more looking at those targets. I can speak as a case that we are like currently discussing with one of them, looking at MGAs in Asia. So that's the proof by the example. I'm stopping at that stage on the overall trends and more or less looking at the value proposition of those players in the value chain. Okay? And again, if I look at my players, reinsurers, insurers, agents, brokers, and so on, at least these core activities, I mean, are quite clear. So I'm not going to comment that gray part, but their movements regarding strategic developments is something which is probably important to understand on why they are evolving this way and why they are tending to step into other areas. And just to stick in the 15 minutes, I'm going to move to the next pages so you can see some focus on few types of players. So if I start by reinsurers, there is what we call the paradigm shifts. I mean, you can say it's been started or initiated a few years ago, or some years ago, and we've seen it ourselves. I mean, as a service company working for some reinsurers, and we've been doing projects for them on this evolution of their business model and the way they are developing. So on the left, you can see their core business model, which is typically, I mean, providing reinsurance, of course, but also risk management services, given their capability to handle data and provide insights out of this. So that's really their core things. But in terms of development, they are developing into like having direct investments into an ecosystem, typically a insurtech ecosystem or a tech ecosystem, or like companies providing or enabling them to have like better access to data or better insight in managing data. So that's one thing. And they invest either in their own resources by hiring experts. That's one of the things. But they also invest directly in terms of equity in some companies for doing so. And some companies could be insurtech, or like eventually some becoming at some point like MGA kind. And new services, what I've been surrounding here, is something which is definitely, at least at some point, not only thinking about doing product development, but at some point doing product development that they package into a full standard value proposition, which looks like an MGA. Okay? So I'm speaking because I've seen it, and we've been again doing for some players. So we've been working for like one of the leading reinsurer, like a German one, out of a German office. So we are like German origin, so that's no surprise. And we've been looking for them on an affinity product, which I cannot name here, but and we've been developing for them the product development, the pricing, the platform that enables to do the admin. The policy admin parts, and the eventually the TPA parts. So that's we've been looking for a reinsurer on that, and eventually on the go-to-market for like how they can propose a distribution. And now this product for them is something that they can propose as a turnkey product to primary insurers. So that's one of the things that they've been doing. Some others are doing it, and I think like most insurers are thinking about this kind of thing. So that's the thing. On the other hand, I'm going to come back on the insurtech. Most insurtech are liaising or partnering with reinsurers to do the same thing, to develop a product, and then having the backing of that product by reinsurers. It's much easier for them to go directly to a primary insurers, and of course propose the turnkey product in this manner. Speaking about insurers, okay. So this slide is a bit dense, but takes also some time to develop. We looked at what is the new normal, and new normal, we looked at it after the COVID-19, so that's just an extract of it. Of course, like this has provided different things, so needs for efficiency, resilience, and more responsibility. We developed this around 6 pillars, which are like explained a bit more into the reports and available also on demand. Out of these 6 pillars, we see that at least 3 of them are something that can be supported or enabled or easily achieved by partnering with some MGAs or tech companies. Of course, the first one, which is digitalization, that's one of the things which we've seen moving at an incredible pace for the last few months with this crisis. Prevention services, definitely on top of the agenda of all insurers which I meet. And that's one thing. And these services are frequently part of the portfolio of what MGAs or tech companies assimilated to MGAs are like developing. And that's one thing. And the third one, the fourth one, you can see is about scaling up. And here again, this is partnership with some services provider or even alliances, which is a bit different. But that's interesting topic to think about from an insurer perspective. Moving about the MGAs themselves. So if you look at that page, I mean, what we found interested in building the report is that the players that can be seen as MGA today do not have the same starting point, and that was probably like quite important. And so there is a couple of players here, so I'm not going to mention probably all of them, but you can see from the left, I mean, some of the most well-known, and starting from being a pure network access, a care provider network, which was the core and the primary assets, and developing from that network, then evolving simply and naturally for like developing policy admin, claim management, and then of course proposing sales and distribution. And then once you have that, then you can propose product development, and you can be a full range MGA, and to some extent being like kind of a leader in that market. You can see, I was speaking about MSH as a starting point, but that's obviously one of the most interesting case in Asia, particularly in China, but also in Asia. You can see some players coming from the pure healthcare landscape. So Fullerton is one. Again, starting from treatment and claims management and evolving along the chain to become something broader than that. Nanyang is an example which I found like very interesting, and there is a full case study in the report. Starting on the other end from the pure broker perspective, and having made an incredible transformation in the frame of 5 years. For the last 5 years was something very quick, moving from pure brokers to becoming more of a tech company. I think was a good strategic move, like investing in tech, and so enabling to have the platform for policy admin and product development. And then eventually, I mean, last year making a strong acquisition to access and to gain the treatment. So they acquired a network which possess the treatment or the network, care providing network, and a TPA proposition, which makes them like in effect being typically an MGA. CareVoice, which also is on the call today, so that's one of the cases that's of course interesting. Starting from being more on the tech side, having developed like a strong platform for tech, policy admin, and access to treatment, and then gradually evolving to being able to provide TPA and eventually underwriting and eventually distribution, which is something that makes a full MGA model as such. Even if we don't discuss about the definition. So that's, I think that was interesting to see the starting point and the way people are evolving through that chain, because that makes potentially a number of players being in that landscape over the next few years. The next one it's almost like almost finished. The next one is about the healthcare providers, and here not going to comment, but we see a number of, so I just mentioned about Fullerton, but there is another number of players like, so Raffles, but for example, in Singapore, Parkway, which is also like a unique case in itself, having developed like, again, a full value proposition, which puts them in the center of an ecosystem. So we understand the logic, and that's also great moves that we see in Asia, a bit less in the rest of the world. So I think Asia is very strong for that thing. I've been quick on this, but that's for the sake of the discussion. And just probably the last page before moving on. This is, so you can see in the report there is like a landscape. So I want to be cautious about it. This is maybe not intended to be a fully exhaustive landscape, but that's what we've seen to our best extent in terms of landscaping the thing. So you can see some presence of various players across Asia. So the presence you see is kind of very strongly marked by China, Hong Kong, and a bit Singapore. A bit less in Southeast Asia, but I think it's something which is to be developing. And we also put some elements about what each player is proposing, because the value proposition by each MGA is not exactly the same. And so we have cases in the report which can be to look afterwards. And this was obviously opening a number of questions about like what are the segments or product where there is most value for insurers, what are the reinsurers going to do in these things, what kind of level of expansion going to be here, what kind of regulatory evolution to expect, which markets going to move towards this model, and probably going to stop here because I think that's a good opening for the discussion afterwards. So if you want to take over the presentation, you can switch back to the main thing.
Hi, I'm Lauren. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
All right, so thank you for your insight for sharing. I think it's a great feat that your team pulled this together. It's a very dedicated study to a very specific area, and it will be a very valuable asset for everyone to look at. So now we're going to move on to the panel discussion. Lauren, whom we just heard the sharing from, is also going to join the discussion. He is the head of insurance practice at Roland Berger in Asia. So Lauren, would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself to everyone? Just really quickly say hi and talk about your career for a little bit. Hello, Lauren.
Myself again? I think I introduced myself already, so I think it's fine. So I'm partnered with Roland Berger, looking after insurance in Asia. So that's.
All right, great. We'll hear more from Laura in a little bit. And then now we're going to move on to, so one of our panelists is going to be Julian Mangual. He is the CEO of Southeast Asia and Regional Health Solution at Cigna. Julian, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit and say hi to everyone?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good evening. Yeah, I look after Southeast Asia, which covers a bizarre geography from Australia up to Hong Kong, with Thailand, Indonesia, and Singapore in between. I also look after all of our distribution for health, as well as networks, clinical services, and other health tech capabilities. So it's a real pleasure to join tonight and hear and participate in the debate.
Great. And then the next panelist we have is Yen Vilish. He is the Chief Business Officer at the CareVoice. Yen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, it's a pleasure to join this panel. Apart from the Laura, I've really been in here with Julian and Helen, who are the VIP leaders in Hong Kong and Southeast Asia. Myself, I'm one of the co-founders of the CareVoice and looking after the business in Hong Kong and our Southeast Asia expansion. I think the CareVoice is a InsurTech platform, health InsurTech platform, and our mission is to make health insurance more human. We are headquartered in Shanghai and now strategically positioned in Hong Kong for a further expansion. And I think this topic is very close to us because when you look on the report, what Lauren was just talking about, we did start it as operating around the network and policy administration and being able to enable the insurance to quickly utilize it, but now more and more tapping into the product design and the smart channel opening for the sales. So I'm very pleased to be here and share some of the experiences which we have with some of our insurance clients.
Okay, great. So before we introduce our last panelist, I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions along the way, please remember to submit your questions by clicking on the Q&A button, and we'll address those questions in the end. So right now we're going to introduce the moderator of our panel discussion. She is Helen Lee. She is the General Manager at FinTech Association Hong Kong. She is an enthusiastic advocate for sustainable finance and impact investment. So I will give the floor to Helen. Why don't you give a little introduction for yourself and get the discussion started. Helen?
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, everyone. Very nice to be on this healthcare drinks to be able to moderate this panel. I think it's very exciting times the insurance industry is in. As we have just heard from Laurent, there are a lot of moving parts. And when there are so many moving parts, it actually creates a lot of cross synergy as well as quite a few challenges. So riding on what Laurent was just saying, I would probably want to open up the floor, being a fintech as well as impact investing, aficionado myself. I'd like to open the floor to all the panelists to see what are the single largest takeaway. What is the main takeaway you have around the MGA report that Laurent just shared? Maybe I can start with the insurer, Julian.
Okay, really good question. I guess where I start is it's not a surprise, but it's a great reminder whereby making these relationships work really well is all about cultural understanding. So it's great to see what does an MGA expect from an insurer, and how does an insurer adapt itself to the needs of an MGA as well as its customers to be successful. So I guess the key takeaway for me is the importance in understanding the needs of each person in the ecosystem, and as an insurer being able to adapt ourselves to that. And it's a really good reminder on the importance of that as we look to partner to be successful and tap into the unmet needs of consumers across Asia.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point, because it's not so much about us kind of competing one against the other, but we are all competing against time. Really. And on that, I want to turn to Jan. What is your single largest takeaway, main takeaway from that, Jan?
Thanks, Ellen. My takeaway is, which goes more to the real-time cases, is that every time we talk about the technology, we talk about the MGA, we talk about the wellness features, we talk about the customer experience, but ultimately it comes down to, and especially now after the post-COVID era, is still to the top line. How can we drive the sales? And my takeaway is looking at really what the insurers are expecting from the MGA, and it still comes on the top as access to the new market. And how can I strengthen my tech capabilities? I think what I see right now with discussion with some of the executives across Southeast Asia is, ultimately looking at how can I quickly, recoup my losses from sales which I lost past 6 months. What kind of alternative channels I can explore? Now more than ever, the word about digitalization and how quickly I can bring the technology is even more acute, because the people really pulling ourselves to their cell phones and to the digital services. And lastly, if I cannot find the new segments, and if I cannot develop so quickly the digital experience, how can I at least keep my existing customers so I don't bleed all the way? So I think these are the three things, and this is what stick with me, that really the access to the new markets and tech capability comes as the top.
Great, thank you so much, Jan. Now on that, I actually turn to the next kind of perspectives from the MGA report that Laurent just shared. There are so many diverse segments within the insurance landscape, the ecosystem, as he well put it. Which of these segments do you think it will help to drive the most value from the MGA? Perhaps I can start with Laurent first on this one.
Mm-hmm. So just on segment, you mean like a product or like
Yeah, product, or client or claims and all that, the different segments within the industry. Which do you think will have the most value add in terms of as the driver of the MGA?
Yeah. So what I mean, the thing is that this landscape and the evolution is kind of a fact. So it's not just about like, so there is plenty of intentions, and as you mentioned, I mean, here it's not about competing, it's about like partnering. So partnership within the insurance landscape has always been there for many years, so it's not something new. And this partnership is because everyone brings value to the others. So it's not like, it's not people trying to step somewhere else, it's like actually they are bringing value. And then this value is in the end, ending up in a contract between an insurer and reinsurer, like with an agent, a broker, an MGA. So that's something which is a fact. Now, the places where I think it's bringing probably the most value to insurers, because at the center of this ecosystem is kind of time to market and access to new markets. That's probably the thing. So the rest can provide value in terms of quality of services, things, but this time to market and value. And here, I think one of the segments is kind of the affinity products. Okay? And affinity product is a very broad landscape. So we can have like everything going from pet insurance to some specific type of clients or thing. But that's some of the thing which is I think interesting, because each of these affinity products has some dedicated needs in terms of product offering. So the insurance product, which is for them, is very unique, and the servicing of it is also very unique. So that's one of the things. And affinity can be around product, but it can be around segments of population. So even speaking about high net worth, or some people which are like tend to be in a different level of wealth compared to the other one, are some things that can be addressed by this kind of model in a very strong way. And I've seen some example, I cannot name it here, from primary insurers giving away some segments of affluent clients to an MGA for a pure services purpose. And this is some of the things happening for the sake of better service, better quality, better retention in the end for the clients.
Right. Thank you so much, Laurent. I think that, you know, that whole point about agility, time to market, ramping it up for, you know, for everyone really is quite very interesting. I wonder what is your take on that, Julian?
Yeah, I like to try and keep it quite simple. So I think of it as a platform business model where you're bringing together services and consumers. And so for me, as I think about it, is what's the ecosystem supporting that? Which parts does an insurer want to own and play in, and which parts, to Laurent's comments, does an insurer feel quite comfortable with the idea of somebody else doing it because they're going to do it better and create more value? So for me, as I think about this in the context of our organization, I start with the interesting pieces are around access to distribution, to reach segments, and particularly to reach new segments and build strong, engaged customer relationships. And that's also supported by a really strong platform, which gives us reach and speed to market. And my philosophy on this is if I try and build this myself, it may well take me a lot longer. The quality may not be so good. Whereas actually by doing it outside of my environment, I'm subject to different kind of regulations and approaches, and it gives me quicker speed to market. But in summary, for me, it's about which parts of the ecosystem are we quite relaxed about, and who can bring, as a partner, bring the greatest value to that, and then give us access to consumers and segments in the most appropriate way.
Thank you, Julian. It's you know, spot on. The reach, the access, on top of the agility that Laurent was mentioning. Jan, what would you add to all these as the key takeaway?
Well, I think I can speak from our experience. Laurent briefly mentioned, you know, us as one of the examples in his presentation. I think we indeed came in at the beginning as a policy administrator, helping the insurance to digitalize the service, and then access to the network. And then furthermore, we work out recently into the product design. And product design is very specific part because I just received a question about this. Is it because the branding and positioning and the segment selection, or is it like the underwriting and the actuarial work? And I think in here, where we play the role is to be able to identify the specific segments or the personas around, being able to run some of the tests and partner with the insurances who come in, or insurances who come in with their actuarial background and can, you know, support this product from the technical point of view. But I think really where is the way, and I've seen one of the questions already coming up in here is like how we can also digitalize the sales. And this comes to, you know, the Julian comments, once we have a product, which is, for example, for a specific persona, how can we identify the channels and how can we plug in those channels, perhaps alternative channels, and digitalize this operation? So this process from the exposure of the products to the lead generation, underwriting, and then the service that the consumer can enjoy the service is within the one process. So I think this is one of the aspects. So to your question, which key segment is the prioritized? I see it as well as a kind of like the one platform or one ecosystem which is connected from the different pieces. And I do also think that there's not one single player who could do all of it at once.
Yeah, fully agree. And actually at this point, before we want to, you know, move into some of the cases and the experiences that I think the audience will be very interested in, maybe we can just, you know, pause to take two quick questions first. They are very interesting and good questions from the floor. The first one is really for everyone. It's about digitization of the sales process. Isn't that the ultimate goal for insurers? And what's the role of the MGA, you know, in that whole digitization, you know, aspect? Maybe could we go back to Laurent and then, you know, take it on from there?
If you want, but I mean, I would be humble and probably like, if the question is the ultimate goal for insurers, I would probably like ask Julian to give the first shot because he's an insurer himself. So yes, sure. I'm a true believer in digitization, but I don't want to make that sense.
Absolutely. Over to you, Julian.
Yeah, thanks for the hospital pass. For me, a lot of this, I mean, the COVID-19 lessons that I think we all had already is that acceleration of digitization is really critical. And again, when I think about the sales process and different elements of the business, yes, the insurers have got a key role to play in that. But again, it comes back to where do you want to sit in the ecosystem? Where do you think you create more value? So I think the answer will depend on the insurer and their position in the market, where they want to play. So some insurers I would expect would be actually quite comfortable with some of this being digitized. I think the most important challenge for the insurer to address and think about it is, one, where do you want to play in the ecosystem? What do you want to own? And where do you want to partner where you think others can create more value and capability than you? I think that's the first key part. The second piece, as I think about the digitization, is, you know, who's going to make the biggest difference? Where's the value? So for me, it really depends where you want to play, and then where you think you can add the most value.
Right. Thank you so much, Julian. Maybe then over to the InsurTech before we move back to Laurent. Jan.
Well, I touched upon it a little bit in a previous one, but I think it also depends on the insurer and depends on the market. You know, look, if you look on a AIA, for example, in Hong Kong, do they really, their key goal is to digitalize their sales channels and look for alternative channels if they have an army of the agents in Hong Kong? Potentially. But if I look on some alternative insurers who are, for example, do not have such a capability or such a large workforce, maybe the digitalization of the channels, I mean, able to tap into different markets, alternative markets, explore different opportunities, it's much more important than for the mass insurer. So I think it also depends the sales digitalization and role of the MGA on the maturity and the strong position of the insurer in a specific market.
Absolutely. Maybe over to the consultant, Laurent, as a kind of summary, on all these.
Yeah, no, I couldn't say better. And the thing is that the consultant would say it depends, because that's what both Julian and Jan said. So it depends on the legacy of the insurer, it depends on the insurers, it depends on the strategy. But fully agree, when you have like an army of agents, at some point you are struggling enough to manage digitization while having satisfying agents. So that's one of the things. On the other hand, I got a strong belief on digitization, which is yes, a goal for insurers, but I'm always very careful of what it means, because in some products or some steps, sales of insurance is not the goal only to be selling online, but the servicing has to be fully digitized. So I'm kind of always making that very strong difference between the pure underwriting process, which could or could not be online, depending on the product, versus the servicing, which then needs to be 99% digitized. So that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. In fact, that leads to the next question. If we can just take that first before we go into, some of these other experiences that I really want to draw out from the very diverse panel we have. Now, this question is actually specifically for you, Laurent. So
I will give it
the
to
question, there's no hostile pass, sorry. Of the MGAs listed in your report, do any of them have true scale on the distribution side? For example, an agent app that automates the policy issuance within the specific channel that the MGA operates in, like a DataBow has something like that, but it still relies on, sort of like the agents. Do any of the MGAs in your report have anything truly automated?
Okay, so first I would just try to avoid to make any advertisement for any one of them, because that's not the intention. So there is some different capabilities. You can see in the report their relative size. So you can also assess what is their scale for themselves, size, footprints, also capabilities. So that's some of the things. In terms of this purely automation of distribution, again, I think it depends on what are the products we speak about, because some of the product might be plain vanilla. And yes, digitization is one of the topic. For some of the products, it's not so much the topic about like on this thing. And maybe another point is that one of the values that they may have is on enabling to get a better animation of the existing sales network of the insurers by leveraging the data they can collect, by leveraging the knowledge they can have on some specific products. by leveraging the partnerships that they assemble with their ecosystem. And this is actually providing a lot of value for insurers as well.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Laurent. Now, I want to turn to something a bit more practical. We've heard very diverse perspectives. We've heard a lot of, food for thought throughout the report on what MGA can bring, the value add that MGA can bring. Can I just invite each of the panelists to share maybe some experience from the customers or experience from their perspectives, their companies? How does that bring the whole thing to life, the whole MGA offering to life? Maybe I start with Julian.
Yeah, no problem at all. So we've got a few different examples of working with MGAs or leveraging their capability across our region. So I guess a couple of examples. One is that where we see the platform opportunity. So where we're partnering with MGAs to enable consumers to come into a platform, and we build services around it. So not only is someone entering that platform has an interest and we provide services to them at the point, i.e. insurance or the like, we're then building ongoing arrangements and relationships with them. So we have multiple examples of how we're using sort of those sort of business models to give us a few things. One is access to consumers that we may not well reach ourselves, and it's very targeted because it's very insight driven. It's based on a very clear understanding of that segment, its insights, what they're looking for, and then providing those services within that ecosystem. So that's one piece of it. The second is how we're then using the capabilities that an MGA may bring to enhance some of the services we provide, from areas such as the adjudication and streamlining of claims processes through to the leveraging of tools to drive customer experience from end to end. So meaning that from the service aspects, from the use of the likes of chatbots and the automation of other pieces of that procedure within a streamlined process. So we see significant opportunity in this space to partner. We see the speed to market it brings and the ability to co-create and be creative to provide relevant solutions for segments that we serve.
Absolutely. I think on the whole point of co-creation and partnership, probably Jan, you would like to add something to that, and in terms of describing the experience that CareVoice might have?
Yes, definitely. I think the co-creation and co-design of the new products is something which been growing in the CareVoice in the past 2 years and really accelerated within these 6 months. I think during the pandemic episode, and I keep bringing it up, but I think there are multiple aspects on the business success or not success, from the leadership, from the decision point of view, from the how do you adjust during the optimization time. But I think I'm quite proud or successful, happy about past 6 months, because we saw rapid growth of need of the insurers, to design the new products, specifically in Hong Kong, mainland China, and now we are in discussion in Malaysia to looking at on how to leverage third-party services to quickly bring something new to the market. So when I was talking about the product innovation, how can I quickly co-design the product with the services behind so it can be attractive? That's, I think, first level. And here we have an example where we're discussing and launching the product in Hong Kong, where we co-designed the product and our platform providing the services, but the network and the claim processing is still sitting within the insurer. But then there could be another example where insurer during this time selling automotive insurance, selling the life insurance, but now suddenly they want to get in a health because market wants it. The leadership, global leadership wants it, and they will see the opportunity. And this is the opportunity where they come in and being able to partner with our platform where we can pull out the different resources, and being able to right away serve them to operate the medical insurance product. And lastly, I think when you look on Malaysia, I think the past 4 weeks, we've been in discussion with the 3 major insurers looking at what they are looking at after. They are still, in Hong Kong and mainland China, we operate a business as usual, but in Malaysia, they still, partially working from home. Business is slowly picking up, But now, the real question is, what are we gonna do, and how we gonna address it? And coming back to accessing the new markets, the really how can I recoup the losses is the major part. And on our side at the CareVoice, I think the critical strategic decision we put in past 6 months is to identifying some of these channels. We call them smart channels, which are alternative distribution channels. They might not be selling insurance today, but they are tapping into the specific population with the specific product to be able to reach and explore these alternative markets. So I think this is the trend which I see, and some of the clear examples that you can see across, for example, the Hong Kong, mainland China, and the Malaysia.
Right. Thank you so much, Jan. Now, before we move to two of the very interesting questions that come up from the audience, I just want to get some thoughts from each one of you, because with the fast-moving landscape of both the incumbent insurers as well as the challengers, the insurtech, what are some of the threats or challenges that you see on the horizon? And what's your take on that in terms of the some of the challenges? Maybe we can go to the consultant and the panel first on this one. Laurent?
You're on mute, Laurent. Laurent, you're on mute.
I think Laurent is on mute.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, sorry. That's better. Yeah, in the end, I mean, this again, this is a very broad ecosystem where we have like players I described before, ranging all the places, doing partnerships for obvious reasons, and because these partnerships are providing value in some dedicated areas to reach out to new customers because they didn't do it before, they didn't have the expertise. Reaching out to targeted segments because that's one of the things they want to enter and get access to it for cross-selling afterwards something. Getting time to market because they know that, I've seen it myself, so they know that their internal processes might lead to having like a 6 months, 1 year project to launch something new, depending on things. So it might be faster to actually partner for doing these kind of things. But ultimately, I would say the main takeaway or challenges for, I would say in that case, for MGAs to be able to provide value to the insurers they want to partner with is ultimately to improve the combined ratio. Whatever it means, whatever it takes, but that's the bottom line. The bottom line of an insurer to decide to partner with an MGA would be how much this can improve my combined ratio. It could be coming from the TPA parts because they would be more efficient than what they can do themselves. Fine. It could be from the policy admin, which is also about efficiency or something. It could be for sales, reaching out to more volume and providing pure top line on things. Could be from the analytics part, which then going to enable to do some better treatments of the data and then improve the expense, the claim ratio. So that's all of this, but this ultimate bottom line value is what makes MGA providing value to insurers versus the one that would be just trying to push.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laurent. Maybe we can turn to Julian from your perspectives and what you can see. What are some of the key challenges and threats you see in the horizon?
Okay, so if I focus on the threats, I mean, my overriding thought when I think of MGAs and where we're heading is that I'm relatively positive about it, in the view that I'm of the view that when I look at it, the opportunity is large. Partnership is really key. I don't think insurers can necessarily do every aspect perfectly. So again, to my comments earlier, it's about picking and choosing where you want to play within an ecosystem. I do see emerging ecosystems that will continue to advance quite quickly. So I think it's more around a partnership methodology is going to be critical to get speed to market. I think in the era we're in, speed to market, ideation, enhancement at pace are going to be really critical. I think the two risks that an insurer faces or just needs to be thoughtful about is absolutely number one, where an insurer wants to play and what your strengths are and what you think is critical to your value chain. I think the other piece is, as insurers engage more and more with MGAs, is to think about the challenges of commoditization and standardization. So commoditization of value, standardization of how things are done, and how an insurer continues to retain differentiation in that customer experience, that customer journey and delivery. And I think the important pieces and themes around that will be how data flows through, how analytics are being applied, and how customers are understood to create that differentiation. But I think they're the threats. But overall, I see the value exchange between the insurer and the MGA in partnering together exceeds the downsides of that at this stage.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I think picking and choosing your battles wisely, while you actually, you know, are more and more, you know, in a partnership kind of mode, is very important. Jan, what are your thoughts on some of the threats in the, you know, near horizon?
Well, first of all, the Kervoish likes the attitude of the insurers like a Julian. I must say that, you know, past 4 years, I have engaged with the hundreds of executives across the health insurances, and there's always going to be a question of the insurer, you know, build versus buy, or outsource versus build in-house. And I think you can see that over the time, the situation is changing, and most of our partners right now are the insurers who are very forward-looking and looking on a partnership which can speed the things rather than building everything in-house, which we have a lot of examples of. When you're building something in-house, it takes time, and it's very risky once you launch it to prove the concept. One of the examples is when you design in the new product, it might take quite a long time, and once you launch it, the market might not accept it. So, you know, I think these are the areas where I don't see the threats, and I do see the partnership between the insurer and the third-party providers as a way forward, and ultimately making the difference versus the other established players.
Thank you so much, Jan.
Maybe just to complete on those two things, because it's yeah, partnership is key, and then fully agree that choosing battles and things. Maybe one of the threats, because I mentioned probably challenges for MGAs, but one of the challenges for insurers is that if being able to pick up the best MGAs in the areas, to integrate, to be faster to market, to have a better value proposition, one of the basic threats or basic challenge that they're going to have is to get a technological platform that would enable to integrate them in a fast way. I speak about API because I've seen, like, I mean, if you have a make or buy strategy which is well designed and well thought through, if you want to launch your product much faster because you partner with an MGA which has a great capability of doing so, then that's quite of a shame if it takes you internally ages to build the APIs to connect that new partners to your own legacy system, because you are losing this edge that you are looking for when working with MGAs.
Yeah, very true, very true. Thank you, Laurent. At this point, I want to, you know, share a couple of really interesting questions that we have from the audience, and, you know, in no particular order. You know, the first one: MGAs are a little bit less familiar here in Asia than they are in Europe or the US or the UK. So, are the insurers in Asia, you know, is that a roadblock? Is that a stumbling block for adoption or mass adoption of MGAs? What is everyone's thoughts on that? Any volunteers to go first?
I can take the first shot and
cool.
I think it's not. That's why also maybe it's a difference. I mean, UK, US, yeah, that's the pure Anglo-Saxon world. So I think that model has been established for years and years. But I would say that the shape or the setup of MGAs over there might not be exactly what they are, what they tend to be here. So I think it's just different markets with different value proposition. And if you look at Greater China, I mean, in terms of technology, there is quite some advance compared to even US or UK. So on many aspects. So the players starting from the tech world, evolving to include distribution and or admin and claims, have technically some very strong technological edge on this thing, which is quite different from like traditional MGAs in UK, US, which are like more built on on a distribution model. So I think it's a different angle, different market. Yes, the evolution is coming in, and I think that's kind of the intention of the report, to see where it can evolve and emerge.
Right, thank you. Can we turn to Julian now for this?
Yeah, when I think about this, like anything in the world, you know, there's some adaptability that's going to be required. People understanding it and having the patience to do so. Definitely when you're not used to it. But I think ultimately, like many things in life, it's going to come down to a couple of comments that were made earlier. One is, what's the value exchange? So as an insurer, as we look at these different business models, what's the competitive edge that it creates? What's the compelling value it creates for consumers that makes it make sense? And as long as that value exchange is on the positive side, I think insurers or some insurers of a certain mindset will certainly consider it and be open-minded to it. And if it's enhancing the value proposition, enabling the said insurer to achieve business goals that they seek and to position themselves well for the future, then whilst it's a new concept, I think people will adapt to it pretty quickly if it's achieving those goals.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Julian. Yan, what are your perspectives on this? Is it a stumbling block?
I do not think that MGA is not a very well known concept as much as in Asia compared to the West world. I think it's driven by the digitalization. I recall, you know, in 2016 in mainland China, if you would have an e-claim, it was like one feature to have at that time, and everyone was, you know, stepping into it. But 2-3 years later, the whole ecosystem changed completely and go into the, you know, the online distribution, a lot of online brokers coming in. Now in Hong Kong, we see more and more digital insurers coming in. So I think the speed of the digitalization and really the literacy of the people in Asia utilizing these services drives the MGA and drives the different models and drives really ultimately the ecosystem be connected across. And you know, for those incumbent insurers who stepping in, partnering with these technologies, it drives this MGA model to help them to across the different key segments which we discussed before. So I do believe that even maybe if MGA was not as well known, you know, 5 years, 10 years ago in Asia, now through you know, the digitalization and different approaches, it's growing at much rapid speed than in the rest of the world.
Yeah, agree with that fully. Now, the next question actually, again, is for everyone. You know, providing health insurance coverage for an aging population is very challenging, increasingly more challenging. So can MGA actually add value and help with that? Any volunteers to go first on this one?
Why don't I take that one as someone in the health space? So, I think about the aging population is going to continue to create demand, but aging population is just one aspect. Chronic disease will continue to rise because of our lifestyles. Demand on healthcare services are going to continue to increase at pace, and supply is going to continue to be challenged by this. And I would say there's three very simple challenges that we all seek to address, and certainly my organization does, which is as follows. One, affordability. How do we make healthcare sustainable and affordable for people to be able to use? Number two, how do we make sure it is predictable? So when I'm accessing healthcare and leveraging it, it's not opaque, but it's something I fully understand. I know what the costs are of that service. And the third piece is going to be, how do I make it simple? It's easy to understand, simple to access, simple to use, and easy to understand. So if you put those three pieces together, I do think an MGA will have opportunities to partner with insurers to make that happen. So when we talk about simplicity, part of that challenge is going to be about how we make the end-to-end process much easier to access. There'll be areas where MGAs might be able to support that. Secondly, affordability is going to be driven by both the usage of the clinical services and how we access care, but also how we prevent care. So again, prevent chronic diseases evolving too quickly. So again, I see opportunities there to partner to reach consumers much earlier and educate, and through platforms being able to have that ongoing engagement. So I do think there'll be partnership opportunities. And again, some insurers will pick and choose the bits they want to play in and how they want to then partner to deliver on those three commitments within the healthcare space.
Thank you. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Julian. Jan, you know, apart from the simplicity, affordability, predictability that Julian talked about, what are the extra perspectives?
I think Asian population is very unique for elderly and for elderly care, and it's definitely going to be the battle who can crack this. What we see, and one of the projects which we are, working on right now is how can you target them better? How can you target this elderly population? And one of the aspects which, from our product perspective is, the population across the Asia, we call them as a sandwich population. You target the 30, 40 years old, usually in office, freshly married, having the kids, but also taking care of their parents. So how can we target this population with the product, which Julian mentioned, and I fully agree? How can we make this experience for the elderly the most accessible? And sometimes I hear the voices, there is the activity monitoring for elderly. There is, the online diagnosis for elderly. But how they gonna use it? How they gonna access it? How they gonna learn about it? And this could be the angle. And then, the parents relate the care of the old elderly, of your father, of your mother, and being able to, through you, access the health insurance and access some of these digital services, and you help them to monitor it and help them with the health prevention or the health medicine adherence is a way to look at it. And this is a very specific example, but I do feel that it does offer a lot of challenges as a elderly population, but also a lot of opportunities, how we can really tap into the right target. And perhaps elderly is not the target, but it's perhaps their children who could help to support the growth of the MGA and specific products.
Perspectives that you see. Yeah, very true. Very true. Thank you, Jan. Laurent, anything to add on top of these perspectives?
Already two very great perspectives. So just try to now maybe two things. I think this what the triangle that mentioned Julian, I think it's very true. I've seen it, like if you look at the MGA model of the kind of the one starting from the healthcare side. I mean the Fullerton or the Parkway. I mean that's kind of the thing to propose this simplicity, affordability, transparency. I mean that's for predictability. That's really the thing. On the aging population, I think it creates tons of opportunity. I mean that's probably the other way to see it. I mean that's a great population. We can see some example also in China, which is very very important. And then the way to address it from an insurer perspective is either to probably assemble a number of partners and players on the market that can help to actually serve those new clients and understand how they behave and access them with some services and things. That's one of the way. And assembling is a key asset or a key capability, a key skills, a key know-how of insurers historically. So that's one of the things they can do. But the other way is also like if an MGA is good enough, or at least to have like a sound value proposition for that, I think they've got everything to make it even more better value proposition by having at the same time technology which is enabling to serve this specific population, whether it's with device or with some services or things attached to a wearable device or thing. That's one of the things that MGAs are good at. I mean, the one with a strong tech angle. Second thing is a targeted sales. MGA are very good at doing this targeted sales. So we speak again about an affinity group, affinity of being a senior or elderly people. That's again another example of affinity players, and they are very good at this. So that's one thing. And third thing, back to my point about improving combined ratio, MGA can be very good at analyzing data of what they collect and what they serve to help insurers improving either the product design serving the aging population or improving the admin and claim management of these part of things.
Thank you so much, Laurent. Now, the next question, I know we're running a bit over time, but this is a very interesting question as well, is for everyone on the panel about what are your experiences and observations about MGA applied to life insurance. Maybe we start with Julian, is it possible?
Yeah, absolutely. You can ask me. I'm in the health space, so I'm probably not the best qualified person to answer it. But again, I would have thought that the answer will be, without too many practical examples, that MGAs can again continue to streamline the process at the front of the sales process, so how it works, can also help the life insurers engage. And I would go further, can integrate to modernize face-to-face distribution. So I'd have thought one of the big opportunities in the marketplace would be this, which is today, face-to-face is still a key business channel in our markets, in Asia in particular, but it's still got plenty of room to be modernized. And I think working with MGAs can bring that digital capability, that streamlining the process and that customer experience to actually aid that sales channel to be even more effective. That would probably be one area that would be, in my mind, quite relevant. And of course, some of the areas we talked about today, such as claims and the like, again, I think MGAs can play a really key role, and also can bring consumers to platforms where life insurers may participate again. There would be some thoughts, but they're, again, as I say, I spend more of my time in the health insurance space, but I thought they would be some obvious relationships.
Well, thank you, Julian. That's a very well qualified answer. Okay, so maybe Jan, your perspectives on this, life insurance and MGA?
Yes, it's a good question. We, as a CareVoice, we are also a health insurtech, so we work mainly with the health insurance companies. But I think, you know, even though you're working with the health insurance companies, you do work with the teams or the executives who managing the life policies or who managing the critical illness policies. And these policies usually have one characteristics. Once you sell this policy, you have no idea what your customer does, because they claim it only when this disease happens or when something happens. So I think where MGA can add value in here, it's on the service part. And on the digital service part, when I buy the life insurance or the critical illness insurance, if I have some service which I can engage every day, whether it will be symptom checker, whether it will be the, you know, the content engagement, whatever service would be from the more health perspective, can already add value to the insurer to generating more data, generating more information about the specific customer, and then going back to the front end of the chain on the sales. So, you know, how this information, how this data, which I gather, which I usually wouldn't have no idea what they're doing, can gather, utilize, and potentially better target with my other product, whether that would be health insurance or other insurance, for a cross-selling opportunities. So I think this would be the area where I would see that MGA can add a value to the life insurers.
Right. Thank you so much, Jan. Laurent?
Yeah, maybe to try to give like a broader view. First, in life, I would differentiate two words of life, probably the pension and savings part and the protection part. But I think it's not exactly the same topic. So protection part would be closer to the health one, and then that's exactly what Jan just mentioned. So I mean, helping to I mean, from the data side, from the tech side, I mean, collecting and analyzing, providing additional elements. This is something that MGA can bring on this. On the life side, honestly, this is, I mean, the life side, the pension and saving side, this is definitely a world of physical meeting. I mean, probably even more in Asia than elsewhere, but no, not even more. I mean, it's definitely a world of physical face-to-face advice. This world is going to change a bit because of the COVID. And so, I mean, I mean, I'm sitting in Hong Kong. I'm working for a big insurer right now, which is facing that situation. And then the agents for the last 2-3 months have been, they had to find some new ways of getting access to their clients. I mean, that was a need. So this will slowly moving to something. But honestly, having observed like all other markets in the world, pension and saving is still going to be like a human-to-human world because of the advice part of it. So in that case, MGA, I would say probably limited, beside probably eventually a capability of helping to manage the network, which is something also which I mentioned earlier, which I think they can help.
I think if I jump in, I do
Right.
agree with Laurent that maybe the current post-COVID era might change the things a bit. I think we also see the insurers in here in Hong Kong, recording big losses because the mainlanders do not travel to the Hong Kong behind these life policies. So is there any solutions which can, for example, enable the face recognition, can help them more to being able to still purchase these products cross-border without risking, of the traveling and potentially catching the disease? I think these are some of the questions and the areas where the MGAs and the insurtechs and health tech in general will be addressing in a very near future.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we run a little bit over time, but I don't think we could wrap up this panel without seeking, one's maybe the most important thought or top of mind from the panelists here, in the post-COVID new normal, in the near, near-term horizon. How do you see the insurance landscape? What do you see as the single most, different in the post-COVID normal, if you see that? Maybe we start with Laurent.
Yeah, so I mean that's a good one. So the difficult to make a single thing. So I can quote again the page which is included in the report. I think this new world has been. I think the good news, honestly, is that this new world or this virus has triggering with no escape insurers to make significant moves that some of them didn't make for some years. So I had conversation with insurers like at the peak of the virus. Some of them were telling me like, look, it took us maybe a few days, a week, and everything was back to normal. Working from home, handling claims, everything was fine. I got some others telling us like then it took them months because they didn't have a BCP in place. So the gap is huge. Okay. But probably the thing at the end is it triggered that move to digitization. So that's for sure. And then the new world is there's a bit of background noise. Yeah. The new world is simply about efficiency, resilience, and responsible. And I can insist. I mean that's the sixth pillar in the report. I think responsible would be like one of the things that insurers would have to show. I've seen some good moves and we've seen very strong move from insurers during the crisis. Some of them launching within a week a new product supporting the doctors, for example, in China. And honestly, this was showing the level of agility that insurers can have in launching products in a week after the lockdown. So that was like a kind of amazing versus like the usual lead time that they have for launching products. So this is possible. And this was creating obviously substantial positive corporate responsibility feedback. So I think that out of these three pillars, efficient, resilient, and responsible, I think responsible is some of the things that could change on this thing.
Absolutely. I think more responsible way of doing business, sustainable way of doing business is very much what COVID has brought to the forefront. Julian, post-COVID new normal, what's your?
Yeah, okay. So for me, it's a few ideas I'll just throw out for you quickly. The first is, I think it's all about understanding customers and then the ability to be responsive to changing customer needs at pace. So that's one thing that I think COVID teaches us. And then the rest links to it, which is in doing so, the first thing is you need to therefore create simplicity, that simplicity inside your organization to be able to respond. So much more localization, much more local decision making and autonomy, and simplicity for consumers to be able to access your services. That gives rise to the third trend, which is acceleration of digitization. So how quickly we drive digitization will just go faster and faster to cope with those other two demands. And I think the last piece that supports this is then about bravery and courage. It's about insurers stepping up and taking on the opportunities this gives in a disruptive market. always is when the growth opportunities come. When the new normal arrives, it's taking those bets and really embracing it. And all of that gives rise to speed, to market, to take advantage of the opportunities it creates. And that, I think, they're the characteristics which will make for successful players post-COVID. Less so before, but even more so now post-COVID.
Take on that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Julian. I think I was moderating a virtual bank, a webinar a couple of days ago, and it's very similar kind of sharing that the virtual banks have on top of their mind as well, is that agility and also that courage to actually rise up to the occasion. Yan?
Yes, I believe I agree with both Laurent and Julian. I think what Laurent mentioned about it's fantastic how the product can be within the 1 week launched. I think it's even more challenging when you want to adjust some of the technology or some of the features or services within 1 week, or you've been able to utilize the agility and address the market through the digitalization within the speed. I think this is something which we've seen in the market, and we work with some of the insurance to be able to enable this. What is the future going to look like? I think, when you look, and Julian mentioned it before, and I think we discussed before as well, that it's going to be around the MGA, it's going to be surrounded by the services. And it's going to be surrounded, to me, it's going to be about the connected services and connected ecosystem. And then ultimately, whether you buy the health insurance, traditionally right now from your insurer or the agent, or whether you will buy it through, for example, the driver sharing the application as a part of the service, or is it going to be majorly 90% of the services, and the insurer will be, or the insurance part will be playing only the role as a protection? This is something which I'm very excited about, and I believe that we are experiencing right now the complete change in consumerization of the health insurance, and the service part in the future will play a very important role around the traditional protection scheme, which insurance been here for past 400 years.
Your take on that? Yeah, thank you. That's really great. He's looking at a brighter future where we all emerge post-COVID a bit stronger. So on that note, I think we really need to wrap this up. There's a lot of engagement from the audience. Want to thank everyone for that, and really honored to be moderating the panel. Want to thank each and every one of the panelists as well.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I just have a few final things to say. I want to first give a big thank you to Helen for moderating, doing such a great job at moderating the panel. I think you really extracted the most important ideas and insights from all of our amazing panelists as well. So to everyone in the audience, if you have any further questions for any specific panelists, you can reach out to us. We'll deliver your question to the panelists. And then now I think we're going to wrap this up. I hope everyone had a great time and gained new knowledge and ideas from the webinar. Follow up with us if you have questions. And then in the end, feel free to scan the QR code to join our WhatsApp group. It's here that you can make new friends and continue the discussion. All right.
Great, thank you. I would like to just add, Helen, thank you so much for moderating this panel. It's always a pleasure to have you on a panel because the way how we doing it, it's always a great experience, and I'm very honored to be part of this panel with the Laurent and with the Julian, and I had a very good time, and I think the discussion also been quite fruitful. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot, Helen.
Cheers.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.